We're so thrilled to once again be joined by Clint Howard.
Welcome. Sit, be comfortable.
That was actually pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sit, be comfortable.
See, now you could have dubbed yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that version of that scene. So, Clint, I want to ask you, your dad was an actor, your mom was an actor, you come from an acting family. Was there ever a time in which they wanted to discourage you from going into the family business? Because obviously, it's a rough business, as we all know. Or was it just encouragement the whole time?
No, Mark, the way you framed that, no, they didn't discourage me at all. My dad, mom, they were both very positive people. My dad, Rance Howard, and my mom, Jean Howard, they were lifers in the business, and they loved the business. But they were aware that it was tricky to go from being an adolescent into the adult acting world. And I was always given plenty of options and plenty of opportunities to say, no, I got other things to do. Like when I was in high school, I turned work down because, I played on the high school baseball team and Jiminy Christmas, there just was other things going on. I did work a few times each of those years, but no, I was preparing for the long haul. I don't. When I went to college and studied journalism for a brief period of time, and I sort of had a gift for writing, still do to a degree, I certainly would, I thought about it, but listen, I could, honest to God, I could make more money as an actor than I could being a stringer for a newspaper back in the early 80s. So it wasn't really a question to me.
So when you were sometimes turning down some of the roles when you were an adolescent, when you were a kid, was there anything that turned into something that you were like, oh God, I wish that I had said yes to that?
And no, as an adolescent, no, I didn't look back. First of all, I sort of took myself out of the market, so to speak. I would just, I told my agent, listen, I'm playing baseball. I'm on a high school baseball team. I really don't want to mess with stuff right now. There were certainly jobs that I auditioned for and didn't get, and it irritated me, Here's an anecdotal thing that just popped into my head the other day. I auditioned for the role that Randy Quaid played in The Last Picture Show.
Wow.
Yeah, I was young. He's a couple of years older than me, and they went with the old gangly guy instead of the, I would have been, I think I was probably only 11 or 12 years old at the time. But, I certainly have had plenty of opportunities to compete auditioning and not get the job. And that's really a pisser. I'll tell you, when you commit, to learning the material and competing for the role, and then they say thanks but no thanks, there's a lot of muttering that goes on that drive home. Now my mom, Jean Frances Howard, she was the ultimate optimist, and she would say that the auditioning is the real work and the job is just the gravy. And I didn't quite share my mom's rosy outlook on that.
Do you share it now?
No, I'm very competitive. I'm very competitive in almost anything I do. When push comes to shove, if there's 5 or 6 people trying, I try to win at Monopoly, for crying out loud.
That'll be the next panel, actually.
Another movie that I competed for, got pretty much to the finals, and didn't get the role, was a movie that Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton were in called Twister. And Philip Seymour Hoffman was the young kid that got the job. And listen, he was a great actor. Philip was a wonderful dude. And he did a great job in that movie. But, here I was watching the movie in the theater going, God, I could have played that part. So anyway.
Well, I'm done with Peter Bogdanovich and Jan de Bont now. Now that we know that they rejected you. It's interesting because you mentioned Twister, but you so often have played like a scientist or a doctor, or what do you think your appeal is in those kind of roles that you not pigeonholed, but it's something that you've often been cast as?
Well, I've done it famously in a few, like, the Wraith. I played this, really kind of weird, nerdy character, Rughead, who had an eraser head haircut, and, I guess I can play that guy. And then later on in my life, I've done the whole mission control thing, and there was another one. Oh, I was in a short-lived TV series called Space Rangers, and I played the ultimate nerdy little scientist named Dr. Mimmer. And it was fun to do. Well, I think one either advantage or one thing that I think producers understood and realized is I could handle all that gobbledygook. Techno-babble doesn't bother me. I just, if I have any vague idea what the word is and I can pronounce it, I'll say it with conviction. In fact, the one job that I ever did in Chicago was backdraft. And I played an autopsy technician named Rico. And I got to do a scene. It was one of the highlights of my career. I got to spend the day acting with Robert De Niro. And Bob is a great guy. He's really a wonderful actor. And, after about 10 or 15 minutes, he starts out really slow. He warms up. And I was told this, that he's a slow starter. But you just prepare to do a lot of takes. And by the 7th or 8th take, it was just going so good. It was going so good. And I played a guy that had to say things like trictichloride, and a lot of other kind of techno babble that an autopsy technician would have. They were discussing the chemicals that were embedded in this burn victim's body. But let me tell you one story about De Niro. And my wife, Kat, has heard this before. And it really is. It's my foot in my mouth in the ultimate way. My brother Ron directed Backdraft, and it was a big deal to me to get to work with De Niro, and it was a big movie. Ron had graduated up to kind of the next level of movie making, and he entrusted me to play this part. I went in there, I was all excited, and like I said, it started out kind of slow, and then De Niro starts cooking, and the acting, the back and forth is just special. And on about 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm feeling really good. And I don't know if anybody knows what craft service is, but craft service is the food that somebody prepares so the actors and the crew members can kind of nibble as they go throughout the day. And on a big movie, craft service can be pretty elaborate. And a lot of times craft service people, they take pride in offering special dishes and things. And so I'm feeling great, and I'm standing there talking to my brother, and we're kind of taking a break in the filming. And this woman who was the craft service lady, she's walking around with a tray of broccoli pizza. And she offers some to Ron and offers some to me, and I look at it and I go, who the fuck would want broccoli pizza? And Ron had to whisper in my ear, that's Bob's favorite food. And the blood rushes out of my face, and I realize that Bob is from me to Mark. My back was turned, and he didn't make I knew he heard me because I said it that loud. So anyway, Clint puts his foot in his mouth in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I haven't put my foot in my mouth my whole life.
So how do you're facing down this scene with Robert De Niro, and you have to spout technobabble at him. How do you prep the technobabble?
Just learn it, get comfortable with it, rehearse. One thing that my dad, Rance Howard, what he taught me is preparation, preparation, preparation. Like my scene in Star Trek, that had to have been 4, 5, or 6 hours of rehearsing over a 2 or 3 day period. It was all about being prepared. When Ron and I were little kids acting, we were always the most prepared kids on the show. And I've just taken that into my adult world. Nothing beats knowing what the hell you're doing. So if you have a grasp of it, they're just words. Trictichloride. First you spell it out, and then you do the little slashes through where the you know, anyway, it's not that difficult. And Space Rangers was huge for that, because remember, you know, it was about a bunch of grizzly kind of space marines, and I was the one non-grizzly guy, and my character always came in just spouting all sorts of just techno babble. And the only fortunate thing about it is I was probably the fourth or fifth banana in the show, so I didn't have a lot to do. I would usually work 1 or 2 days a week, and I would have one scene. Well, learning one scene a week is pretty easy, you know.
And it's interesting because that show, Pendentium, if I recall, did it coming off of, you know, a bunch of big movies and TV shows. And there were high expectations, but the problem is it was on CBS, which was probably the worst channel you could put sort of a swashbuckling sci-fi show on.
And you know, here's the thing about science fiction. Wildly popular for a relatively small niche. And back in those days, back in the 80s and the 90s, television was still aiming at a pretty big target. You know, so a little niche show that might draw fans. Listen, Star Trek didn't make it for very long. There hasn't been a lot of science fiction shows that have had a lot of traction. I mean, Star Trek is a unique animal because of its staying power over the decades. But listen, we had high expectations. John Watson, Pendentium, and
The third, it was Trilogy Entertainment.
Trilogy
Who
Entertainment.
was the third?
Somebody
should
can
know.
Google
Yeah,
it.
it was Penn, John, and
That other guy was no, wait, it wasn't Mark, was it? No, because he wasn't.
No, I don't know.
Mark Stern worked for them,
Yeah.
but he wasn't the third guy.
Yeah.
He was the development exec.
You know, okay, this is getting anecdotal here for a moment. You know who worked for Pendentium on Space Rangers? Jay Roach.
Oh, that's
Wow.
right.
Okay.
The guy
Yeah, yeah.
that directed all the Austin Powers movies. And Jay was just a very studious guy. He looked like a writing nerd. He didn't look like a guy that knew how to do a joke.
And you played a main mission controller in that as well.
All
Two of
three.
them. Oh, right.
All three. I played Johnson, and in the second Austin Powers, I was in the absolutely hilarious scene about, hey Johnson, it looks like a giant wang. You know, the one-eyed monster. Step right up and do the one-eyed monster. And listen, you got to give Mike Myers credit. Mike Myers, his sense of humor, his style, his moxie for friggin' just throwing it on the wall. And the thing about those Austin Powers pictures, for my money, is that style gets so infectious that you just start laughing because you're laughing. You're laughing because you're laughing. And it also is very brilliant. Mindy Sterling, you know, and of course Vern, you know. Anyway, you know, I've been very blessed. I've worked a long time, but I've gotten to be a part of some pretty cool projects.
You have, and you worked with Adam Sandler on a bunch of projects, and Little Nicky and Waterboy.
Waterboy, Little Nicky, and a couple others. Actually, I may have gotten a little bit on his naughty list back in 19...
Did you talk about his pizza? Was that the problem?
No, I'll tell you what I did. You know, I had to have my hips replaced. And my first hip, and I was in a lot of agony. It wasn't an accident or anything. I just wore the thing down. And I was scheduled to work on a movie that he was producing. He wasn't in it. He was producing. And I got booked for a slot in the operating room. And I told the guys, I gotta take this. I gotta get my hip fixed. This guy's a really good surgeon, and I gotta get my hip fixed, and I can't be in your movie. And so, listen, it's actor's life. I turned the job down, and it was a while before I worked again for Adam. But Adam's a great dude. Adam, you know, Henry Winkler is probably the nicest guy in show business of all time. But I'll tell you what, Adam is not too far behind. Adam is a real Mitch.
I got to ask you, you mentioned earlier that De Niro would be 6 or 7 takes to warm up.
Oh, or
now,
more.
Do you have a preference? Obviously, there's people like Brando who are like the method actors. There are people like Shatner who, if you do more than 2 takes, he's pissed, right? There's and you know, and then you mentioned De Niro. do you have a type of actor that you prefer to work with? And what's your approach to the material?
I like good ones. I like good actors. I like actors that don't suck the oxygen out of the room. People that know how to concentrate, but it doesn't look like that. The world's on fire. I've worked with a lot of really good actors. I've worked with actors that I was told weren't going to be very good to me. I had an opportunity many years ago to work with Sylvester Stallone, and this was in Tango and Cash. And the scouting report for that, because when you're getting to work with a guy like Stallone, you kind of you call around, you find out, and the word on the street was he was not a good man to work with, that he was kind of a diva or a divo or whatever you would call it.
Yeah, that's his reputation.
And yet, when I worked with him, also another great thing about working on Tango and Cash, that day on the Warner Brothers lot, I met Larry King.
Well,
And I was a big late night talk show guy. And when I saw Larry King there, that like made my day. I could sit and talk to Larry King. But anyway, when we started doing those scenes together, Stallone was giving, he was focused, he did his job, he was relaxed. So, listen, that's also good. I don't like guys that take it way too seriously. I haven't worked with too many guys that take it way too seriously, but there's just, I don't know, guys, listen, we all focus, we concentrate, we do our job, and then we let it go. Because we're on to the next friggin' thing. Either the next scene or the next job, and it's not that I don't care, but it's just, to a degree, I hold my work kind of lightly in my hand when I'm going good.
So you're saying you're not a method actor?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what method acting really is. I mean, I do drop into the character, or I actually have another little take on it. Instead of me becoming the character, I say the character becomes me. Because I've realized over time that I'm a pretty interesting guy. And they're hiring Clint Howard. Not Clint Howard to become somebody else, but Clint Howard because he's an interesting guy. And what if this guy that was in the jail acting nutty was Clint Howard? And I don't know, in a way I just kind of turned that on my ear. But again, I don't hold it too tightly. I keep it pretty light.
But Gentle Ben was a method actor. He was always in character.
Method because he wanted food.
One of the other things you are is a scene stealer, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, in a great way. I think about so many of the roles you've done, and even something like Arrested Development. You're in the one episode, and it's so memorable. You and the tree. Obviously, Star Trek. Everyone remembers Balok, It's like you parodied it in the William Shatner roast, where you came back 20 years later or 30 years later.
Well, thank you, Mark. I mean, Jesus, that it's good. Thank you. I try to do good work, and I don't try to chew on the scenery too much. Although every once in a while, I'll see my work, and I'll go, God, Clint, why was I trying so hard? Let it go. I'm sometimes I'm not my own best audience, but stealing a scene like in Arrested Development with Portia de Rossi, that's the actress's name.
Yeah, Portia de Rossi.
Yeah, I swear to God, it was one of those. Literally, I'm on the set for maybe 2 hours. That's all. TV works really fast, and they're moving, and they're shooting over here, and then they're shooting over here, and then all of a sudden, they have me in wardrobe, and they call me to the set, and it was up in a treehouse. And they literally had a cherry picker that took us up into the treehouse. And I was the first in the treehouse. And then she came up, and I swear to God, maybe she didn't like heights, but the minute she got up in that treehouse, she wanted to get down. We couldn't finish that scene fast enough for her. She was just interested. I don't know. She had somewhere to go or something to do. She was looking over the thing, and I'm thinking, God, you know, we're going to be done in 20 minutes anyway. Why not just relax and enjoy it?
Well, we are at Nightmare Weekend, so we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your iconic role in Ice Cream Man. Obviously.
Hey, thank you.
You
guys,
Oh,
hold
no.
on. Here we go. Here we go. Wait for it. Wait for it. It's coming very, very soon. I'm gonna teach all you people what it takes for a man to start putting body parts in ice cream. Because this movie's going to be about a dude that gets hit on and picked on and kicked and stomped to the point where he says, fuck it. And we love it. My wife, Kat, and I, and Norman Apstein are the producers, and we're in pre-production now. In fact, at our table, a dear friend of ours, her stage name is Barbarella. She's an international rap star. Barbarella, she's here. She's enjoying the convention, and she's going to be in the movie. There's a wonderful part for Danny Trejo, and he's expressed interest that he wants to be in it. And this is something that I've certainly cleared it with him, but I'm going to be directing the movie, or at least co-directing the movie. And I was in my brother's first directing effort, and he's always told me that when I direct my first movie, he's going to be in it. And there is a great role for my brother. And it's I don't want to give away too many secrets. You don't see him all that much, but when you see him, it's going to be very impactful. So, you know, we have Sean Kanan from Bold and the Beautiful and from Cobra Kai. He's going to be in it, and it's pretty excited about it. And listen, I will gladly talk about it at the table more, babe. Oh, and also too, that's right, babe. My niece, Bryce Dallas Howard, has a sister. She's got two sisters actually. One of them is in the business, and one of them isn't. But she's got a niece, and her name is Paige Howard. What did I say? Oh yeah, no, she's my niece. Paige is my niece. She's Bryce's sister. She's a dynamic personality and a lovely person, and she's a really good actress. And she's done a little bit of acting, but she would like to do more. And we're booking her to play. She's playing a detective. I mean, as you remember, the Ice Cream Man, ultimately he starts committing crimes. So there are a couple of bumbling detectives that are sort of following around, going, why is this guy? Why is his head in a block of ice? What's the crime here? Why, you know? So anyway, Paige is playing one of those bumbling detectives, and she's got great comedic timing, and she's going to be wonderful. So, and there's a lot of other surprises too. So look forward. We're going to shoot this year. Look forward to probably, most likely, the first part of 2026. I mean, it might get rushed out. Some of it has to do with the distributor, you know. But anyway, thank you for the applause. Yeehaw!
And Ben & Jerry's is coming on board as a product placement?
Well, you know, we're hunting for all sorts of product placement. The only trouble is when you start talking about body parts and ice cream, it does make some retailers a little squeamish. So I don't know. We're hunting at all angles, and there's also. Can I say this about Rispato? Well, my partner over here. Well, the Ice Cream Man has a nemesis. In the first half of the movie, he's got this nemesis, a competitor, and he's the Rispato Man. He's the guy, he's the old Mexican guy pushing the cart, selling the shaved ice. So we're looking to do some commercial tie-ins with Rispato and syrups and stuff like that.
Well, since we're at a horror convention, we mentioned Ice Cream Man. We have to mention about your, I guess, fruitful collaboration with Mr. Uwe Boll.
Yes,
Maybe
Uwe.
we could talk a little bit about Uwe. Oh,
Uwe fan.
that.
Uwe fan out in the
Hey,
audience. Yeah.
you know, granted, Uwe's made some movies that are really you know, a challenge to watch. However, I admire him as a filmmaker. He's a great what? You know, I'm an employee. He's an employer. He hires me. I've worked in 6 or 7 Uwe Boll movies. He's always been very fair, very honest. I was in Blubberella, and I was in Blood Ring, Third Reich, and I was in House of the Dead, which you produced. I was in Backwoods.
Blood Rain 3 or
yeah, Blood Rain, Third Reich. Yeah, the Nazis. You know, Uwe made me jump the shark when he started putting vampires and Nazis together. Although it actually sounds like a pretty good title. But I have a profound respect for Uwe. I really do. You know, so I wish him well. I saw on the internet that he's done a couple of things recently. He's unretired.
He's unretired. He opened a restaurant in Vancouver. Now he's gone back to directing. Of course, we have to call him Dr. Uwe Boll,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'll tell you one little story about Uwe, and this isn't really, you know, he just wants to get the movie in the can. You know, he's always been the producer and the director on his movies. And, you know, normally on a movie set, there's an argument that happens between the producer and the director. The director wants to have a creative vision, and he wants to stretch the dollar, and he wants to get as much as he can get, and he's always tugging on the producer, and the producer is trying to hold the line. Well, that conversation between the producer and the director has already happened in Uwe's head, and the producer has won. So when push comes to shove, it's, cut, Prince, let's go have dinner.
Moving on, put the zombie at the fort and shoot it.
Moving on, we kill these zombies and we have lunch.
Well, I know we only have a few minutes, so let's do some questions. If you want to line up over here at the microphone and ask Clint some questions about your favorite Clint Howard movies. And
oh, yeah. Go ahead. Also, cue on up. Also, you know, Terrifier. Terrifier 3 I was in, and that was a great experience, and those guys are just minches. Those guys are really, really good people. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. Damien, Phil Falcone, David Howard Thornton. So if you ever get a chance to support them, just because they're good people. But anyway, go ahead, sir.
Hi. I was going to ask about Terrifier, but since you already spoke about that, I'm a huge Rod Serling Night Gallery fan, the boy who predicted earthquakes. Do you have any stories about that? Or Roo from Winnie the Pooh. I grew up on those.
Boy, that's the spectrum.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
From a kid that predicts the end of it all to
Roo.
a Disney kangaroo, animated kangaroo.
Who also predicts the end of it all.
Yeah.
Death is coming to the...
I'll tell you what. Here's the thing about I did 2 movies. I did Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, and I did Jungle Book. And I did get to meet Walt Disney on the Jungle Book, and it was a wonderful experience. I was a Disney baby, and when he stepped into the recording studio and waved at me and he said, "You're doing a fine job, Clint," it was one of those moments I'll never forget it. And it's, you know, the fact that I had that with him was wonderful. And the Night Gallery, heady stuff. And I knew what I was what I was doing. I knew what this character Herbie Bittman was saying. Directed by a guy named John Badham, and it was written by Rod Serling. And so, you know, it was. I feel like the material holds up if you get a chance to ever see it again. It holds up really well. Now and I'm seeing a wrestling ring over here. Here's my story about Night Gallery. As much as it's about a boy that is predicting the end of the world, what really enamored me more than any of that was the fact that we filmed at KCOP Channel 13 in Los Angeles. It was an independent channel that had their own sound stages. And we filmed on one sound stage, and on the other sound stage, they were practicing and rehearsing for Wednesday Night Wrestling. So Dad and I and my brother are always big wrestling guys, and the idea that during a break in the filming we could go over and watch these dudes working out their wrestling routines, and they're rehearsing like it's a stage fight. you know, they're getting in the ring and loosening up and then throwing each other and practicing certain kicks. So my memory of Night Gallery was I got to also be inside the ropes in pro wrestling. Cool. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Wow.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so happy to see you. I discovered a really awesome band today, Clint Howard and the Kimpsters.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to put that on a vinyl record?
Vinyl? Well, possibly. You know what, babe? And I'm just realizing that we made a fumble. We didn't pack any Kimpster CDs.
Oh,
I do have Kimpster CDs.
thousands?
You can see it on YouTube. There's two.
I watched.
Yeah. Left-handed
Big
boy.
fan.
Left-handed boy in
It
a
was
right-handed
really
world.
awesome.
Thank you very much. Well, I went through that stage. I was in my early 20s, and me and my best friend Scott Green, we started up a garage band, and we got a guy named Sabino Flores to play lead guitar, and Jay Dean to play the bass, and Tony Rodriguez, and a guy named Mike Bauer, Spooner Bauer, to play the drums. And for a couple of years, we were playing around LA, having a blast. So
Are there any T-shirts left?
I don't know. There might be. Listen, come to the table and talk to Kat,
Okay.
and we'll hook you up.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
God, the Kimpsters. No brains at all.
Hello. I was wondering, since your guest appearance on Seinfeld, does anyone ever walk up to you and say, Ann Landers sucks?
Oh, are you kidding me? All the time.
Even Ann Landers.
What a night. Talk about a day. Talk about ringing the bell in a one-day cameo or just a one-day scene. And it was the environment. Jerry and George were absolutely just nails. They were just so good to work with. And Tom, the director, he was solid. I didn't meet Larry David. Was it? Yeah, Tom. Tom directed the
Tom
episode.
Trinonis, yeah.
Yeah. And it was just a beautiful day in the San Fernando Valley, and I got hired to play this nutty character. And they obviously liked me. I auditioned and I got the job. And I went in, and here's the thing about Ann Landers Sucks, is we were shooting like one camera. We were, they put a camera in the front seat of the squad car, and it was just me and George and Jerry were in the back, right? And we're filming, and the scene's going along, and it's going good, and we could tell there were laughs. And then when the last moment in that scene is that joke, and as that's not the line in the script. It was a line about Ann Landers, but it wasn't Ann Landers Sucks. And what happened was I was going along as an actor, and all of a sudden I had a brain freeze. And I read it in Ann Landers. Ann Landers sucks. And it was because I didn't know the fucking line. And then, okay, the car pulls over, cut, the director's not there because Jerry's kind of directing from inside. And I say to Jerry, I go, Jerry, I'm sorry, we can go around real quick one more time. I'll get that line right. And he had stood up. He had stood up out of the car, and he bit down in the window looking at me, and he goes, "Are you crazy?" Because he knew how well it rang. He knew and it is. I mean, I see it once in a while. Ann Landers sucks. Anyway, that's, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, man.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, one thing I always wanted to know, like in Ice Cream Man, when you had those severed police officers' heads on those ice cream scoops, were the scoops actually making them talk, or did you use some kind of props or visual effects?
Well, the scoopers on paper were supposed to make the mouths move.
Yeah.
Mark Garbarino was the effects guy that designed it, but they didn't work real well.
Oh.
So we had to sort of kind of fake it and mimic it. And the one thing about that, and I'm actually pretty proud of it, that was like almost all improv. Norman, the director, wanted me to just do this puppet show with these kids. And of course, it's really creepy. I got these two bloody heads on these ice cream scoopers. And I just started doing a kind of a show for the kids, and it worked out really well. Something I'm real proud of.
All right. Okay, yeah, it's on one.
Cool, man.
It's Howard. Pleasure.
Sure.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
You hear about stuff, happening on set all the time during films, like whether it be a horrible accident or an epic meltdown from a director or an actor. You've been to so many movies. What was the craziest thing you've ever seen on set?
Wow.
That you can talk about.
No, well, like an epic meltdown.
Or like, something exploded or didn't go right?
Well, I've been around a lot of explosions that either were a little too hot, or they didn't explode, or that's usually kind of frustrating. I'll tell you something that happened to me, and it was really scary, and very personal. I was in a little movie called Digital Man. That I'm sure you can get it on VHS. I don't know whether you can get it on any other platform. And I played a character that turned out to be a robot. I mean, that was kind of what the premise of the movie was, is there's a lot more robots out there than you think.
Spoiler alert.
And yeah, well, don't worry. You're not missing much. But anyway, I played this robot, and of course, we were in sort of a modern, not an airplane, but kind of a hovercraft thing that was flying around, and I was the captain. And there was somebody in the back, ends up kind of commandeering the airplane or the aircraft, and ends up shooting me. And it's a surprise. Instead of blood, there's sparks. And then all of a sudden I fall back, and then sparks are shooting out of my chest. And it's like, oh, he's a robot. Which is fine. I'll play anything as long as I have my social security number I can give them, and they're going to give me a paycheck. I'll play a trained monkey for that, if somebody gives me a paycheck. But anyway, we did the thing, and they rigged up. They call them squibs, but this wasn't blood. This was sparks. So the sparks hit, right? That's fine. And then I fall back. And the sparks, and I fall back, and I'm trying to be cool. I was in my probably early 30s, and I fall back on the ground, and I want to be cool, and I want to have my eyes open. And these sparks are shooting up out of my chest. And one of the sparks lands and hits me in the eyelid. I had a legitimate burn in my eyelid, and I got pissed off. Because first of all, it could have been my eye, and it was because these guys were trying to shoot a little low-budget movie, and it was 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and we've been working all day, and there obviously wasn't safety precautions. So, in that case, safety's. I've never been on the set where anybody's gotten gravely injured. There was somebody killed in the Wraith, but it wasn't when I was working. And then there was somebody that got killed on the Rocketeer, and I was not working the day that it was a stuntman, and he was the Rocketeer, and the jetpack the kid was supposed to be, zooming across the ground 6 inches off the ground with the rocket. The Rocketeer but he wasn't getting airborne, and so it was a thing with the guy on wires. So they rigged him up, and they pulled him too fast, and they pulled him over the edge of the LA Observatory.
Oh, man.
Went down 40 or 50 feet and died. So, industrial accidents, it happens.
Thank you.
Do we have?
Okay, let's try and get through these last two questions,
Yeah.
because we're almost
Listen,
out of time.
these are good questions too, guys.
They
I
are,
appreciate
aren't
it.
they? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Frankie. Thank you for coming. My question is, while filming Ice Cream Man, while you were filming, did you understand the film and how it was going to turn out in the end?
Sort of. Yeah. We knew, our tongues were firmly planted in our cheeks. It was a kid's horror movie. I didn't quite know where all the laughs were going to land, but we knew there was going to be laughs. And this character, he was pretty simplistically written. He's just a crazy guy with a gravelly voice. Literally, crazy guy with a gravelly voice. And the trick on the Ice Cream Man is every day for the 4 or 5 weeks that we were filming, I would drive to work screaming. I would scream at the top of my lungs. This was after the Kimsters, so I had done rock and roll. I knew how to scream and make my voice hoarse. So I would scream, and then I'd show up to work, and my voice would be kind of like that. And I took it to another level. But another Ice Cream Man is going to have a similar kind of trademark gravelly voice. I haven't quite landed on it, and probably if I did land on it, I wouldn't share it with you guys right now. But anyway, so that's the Ice Cream Man stories.
Oh, for sure. Thank you, and I loved you in the movie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this will be the last question, but stick around after he asks his question, because as is tradition at Nightmare Weekend and GalaxyCon, there will be a group selfie afterwards. So stick around for that. But first, you have the honor of the last question of the day. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Clint Howard. Loved you in all your films. You're a great actor, staggering filmography. How did you like making Austin Powers and Backdraft back in the day?
Great experiences. Austin Powers, was very fun. Although, listen, those scenes were shot really quick.
Yeah.
I was probably only on the set for the first Austin Powers, for a couple hours, and for 2 or 3 hours on the second one, and probably just for an hour or two on the third one. It all happens really fast. And like when the first Austin Powers, I didn't have an opportunity to meet Mike Myers.
Right.
He was there, but he was off filming something else on the other side of the soundstage, and I didn't feel bad, but he didn't come over and say hi. He introduced himself to me later and stuff, but it was just, kind of show business. It's kind of how you do it, and so that was, and again, I don't know, you may not have been here Backdraft was great because I got to work with Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
And De Niro, I don't believe I've worked with a better actor. I've worked with some great actors, and I don't, but I just think that day that I had on the set with him was awesome. And I'll tell you now, a lot of times people ask me that question, who was your favorite actor to work with? And I would say that Bob was, as a man. A lot of great guys. There's a lot of great actors, great dudes, I just felt like it was really percolating with De Niro. But also, on the women's side, I'll tell you, that Cate Blanchett, excuse me, Cate Blanchett, when I got on the set, I felt like I was in the presence of a superior actor. She knew the process, she concentrated, she had a baby that was like 7 or 8 months old at base camp. And she wasn't distracted. She put her acting shoes on. We worked all day, we worked hard all day, and I was just really impressed with her. And another actress that I was really impressed with was Nicole Kidman. I got to work with her on Far and Away. And I didn't, maybe it was a little bit of a surprise, but I just felt like, my goodness, this beautiful actress can friggin' bring it. So those are that's my top actors and actresses story.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you.
And thank you, Clint. This was great
Thank
as
you.
always. So great talking to you.
Everyone else, when you're done applauding, you should come to the front of the stage and stand there and look like you're enjoying yourselves. For the GalaxyCon selfie we like to take with the group, Clint's going to stand in front of you. Like, they'll make the photographs available to you. It's a thing. If we actually had doors, I'd tell you that we were going to close them and lock them so you couldn't leave, but we don't have those.